Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Sun is Coming podcast.
Yes.
I'm here with my co-host, Kaleb.
Hello.
And the lovely Jeff Vandergiessen.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for the invite.
We're very happy that you're here. And
It was a really long commute for you to get down here from down the hall.
Yeah, about 20 yards.
Yeah.
15 yards.
We appreciate you making time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a busy day and schedule and all the things. But you have a fascinating story and all the things that probably, I don't know how many people actually know of you, but I guess give us a brief, or not for us, but for anybody else listening, like what are you doing now? And then that will steer the conversation in a very awesome way.
Yeah. Well, I would say now I'm doing too many things.
You do a lot.
Relatable. I'm sure a lot of the audience listening to us can relate with that feeling.
Yeah. I think I've done that since the beginning of time, and that uniquely gifted me in every step along the way that journey God's brought me on. But yeah, I definitely feel like I got my hands on a lot of things. And but most of my time over the last 2 years has been starting up a nonprofit, and really just been interesting to be back on the nonprofit side of ministry after 12 years being sort of on a business side of ministry. Yeah. And being able to just meet and serve and love on pastors and ministry leaders in a new way for me. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that's awesome.
And you came from Mars Hill,
Seattle, baby.
Seattle.
Supersonics.
I'm trying to remember. Like, you moved. When did you move here? Back to Chicago.
12 years ago, August of 2012.
Okay.
So I spent my first 30 years of life in Seattle, born, raised, married, 4 kids in Seattle.
Built a house, right?
A couple.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never bought anything that had running water.
No wonder you always had so many things.
Yeah. Bought my first house when I was 19.
Okay.
Gutted it. And it was complete mold. Like, you could have scraped it and just built a new house. It may have been a better idea. But at 19, I couldn't afford that or do that. So we took it apart and rebuilt it.
That's crazy.
And, yeah. That was, what I buy that in 2002?
Oh.
1? I don't remember.
It's probably a decent investment at this point, or whenever.
Oh, yeah. Well, I turned around and sold it after I'd gotten married and we had a couple kids. My wife was pregnant with our third. So it was summer of 2008.
Okay.
We sold that house and bought another really bad house that needed work, fixed it all up. And we actually just sold that a couple years ago. So
nice.
Some of that helped to kind of fund the nonprofit startup.
That's awesome. Do you miss Seattle? Is your family there, or her family there still?
A lot of them followed us here.
Okay.
So we moved out here 12 years ago, and I lost track. About 75 people that I have brought to the state of Illinois.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah. I stopped counting after that.
Like
that was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like leaving. I'm like, there should be some tax benefit for.
Right.
You're welcome, Illinois.
There's not.
Are you a paid influencer for the state of Illinois?
Right, exactly. It's a ground campaign.
Amazing.
No, we, the first person to follow, I don't remember. It was either my sister and her family, or it was my wife's brother, who was my best man, and his family. So they're all within, 45 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes from us. And then my wife's mom moved out. My parents have a place out here. Okay. So we've had a lot of family follow us.
It's Crystal
nice.
Lake? Somebody's in Crystal Lake?
My sister is. And my parents have a place out there.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
So it's been nice to have family around because I think we all moved here for different reasons, but coincidentally, we're still together.
Yeah.
So it's been a blessing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, we're gonna talk more about what you alluded to a minute ago around the nonprofit ministry that you're doing now. We'll talk more about the company that you started to serve churches in the technology space called Amplio, which you're repping, and whose building we're sitting in right now. If you read the fine print on our podcast, it says powered by Amplio, because Jeff, helps make that happen with the support of Amplio and the team here. But those things all came out of your own personal experience in ministry and in church world and sort of the journey that you went on. So I'd be curious to kind of give us the backstory of some of the, main things, the experiences, the life seasons that you went through that kind of shaped what you've built since then, and the way you've come to understand what it means to serve churches effectively, both in sort of more of a practical, tangible sense, and then now even in more of like a spiritual, relational sense as well, and how that relates to your own journey.
Yeah. So I started working at church like a lot of people when I was young. And it was Mars Hill. So it was one location at the time, 1,200 people. And I got hired to I think my title was service producer. So like everything that the worship pastor and Driscoll didn't want to do, that I got to do all that. That became sort of the technical, director. And as we started launching different sites and stuff, I learned all the technology, doing all the projects, helped a ton with the media communications team, hired my whole college dorm floor to kind of be the initial of that team. Yeah. And we saw the church grow. I mean, it was a weed, and I was young and doing a lot of different things. I loved it. I loved every step of the way of it. It was always on the project side of things. Ended up helping lead what we called the development group. So my job was actually to find buildings and turn them into churches. Really found a nice niche in doing
kind of building
projects.
off your experience, like finding houses and gutting them, and then,
totally. I mean,
same idea.
Oh yeah, I've always been a project-based guy. If you need me to show up to the same place Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and eat a sandwich from 12 to 12:30, I'm not wired that way. I'm not sure I could do it. I'd probably get fired. But if you need crazy things all over the place and keep 20 things straight and keep pushing forward and try to get after something ambitious, like figuring out the puzzle and what the right next steps are and taking people with me and getting it done. I have always loved that and really thrived at Mars Hill because of the growth in that environment. I think a lot of people in ministry are wired that way. Not a lot of square pegs in that way. Like you got to kind of have a wild hair to make it in ministry for a long time. And so I was there for 8 years. Saw lots of really cool things. I think the big picture is like I got to help plant 24 churches. So we were either planting or replanting campuses.
So many in 8 years.
24 across 5 states. I got status on airlines. I was even
that's crazy.
Yeah. And it was actually in 2008 that I first got connected with some guys from other churches. So Dennis Choi, some people might know Dennis Choi.
He's been on this podcast.
The OG. I love that guy. He in 2008 he brought a bunch of the multi-site churches at the time together in Carlsbad, and we met each other. So that's actually where I met Nate Krause, who he and I started Amplio together 12 years ago.
That's crazy, because he was at Seacoast at the time.
He was at Seacoast. I was at Mars Hill. Yeah, and we met at North Coast, and all the Life Church guys and Willow guys. And there was fellowship guys were all there. Everyone. There was a ton of people there. It was incredible. And a lot of us are still. I mean, all of us are still friends. We see each other like we're brothers.
It's funny.
It was one girl.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was probably, I told Todd Elliott this probably 10 years ago. When I was like, oh my gosh, this is Todd. I remember seeing you on, it was the website that, I think it was Dennis and Bill Swearingen were running the Church Tech Round Leaders.
Round tables.
And you.
Yeah, it was the three of us.
And I remember reading as my first church, I was like, wow, look at these guys. And you were in there. Yeah. Todd was in there, Bill, Dennis, and
CTDRT.
Yep.
Is that what it was? That was
something like that.
Because it was a spinoff of the the IT one, which is still happening. They are moving and grooving.
Yeah. But anyways, that's it's crazy because at the time, there really wasn't as many multi-sites as what there is now. Not at all.
No. It was on the front end of what I think was a movement, and it's something different today. But
it's very different. Yeah.
It doesn't have the same steam that it did before. It's a tool in the toolbox. But.
Yeah, because that was 2000. That was 2008 that you started there. Is that what you said?
I started at Mars Hill in October 10, 2004.
2004.
To be specific.
That's crazy, man. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because all that, that
you were
led
in diapers still.
Maybe. Doing some
math is hard.
But either way, that's crazy because that's I looked up to that group of people and going, man, I wonder if I'll ever get to meet or hang out with those
For me,
people.
it was 4 years of doing Mars Hill without any of those guys.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, so 2005, I think, is when Twitter like became a thing,
Yeah.
and a lot of us connected on Twitter.
Interesting.
And it actually there was like real community that a lot of us built, and then that was actually where Nate and I really first connected. And then when we ran into each other at like a conference, like we were immediate like brothers, but it wasn't until that first gathering, I mean, halfway through 2008, where like community in person started to actually come for that whole generation of tech people. We were siloed in our own world, misunderstood, doing our own thing, and couldn't find people who just our tribe didn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't a thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I really don't think that if that group wouldn't have gotten together, I don't think the community of what it is today would happen. Philo wouldn't exist.
Yeah,
I think
there's a lot of
so
pieces.
many different things that now brought thousands and thousands of church production leaders together. I think because of that core group of people, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, companies, nonprofits, all sorts of things that came out of that whole group of people. It's pretty crazy.
It's so crazy.
Every generation, I think that's true. You know, we all start out and we're young and scrappy and we're trying to do things. And then like, as you get more experience, you get to step out and lead in new ways. And like how God, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
And God uses that in super cool ways.
Yeah.
So it's fun. It actually brings me great joy to look around and see how like I get to see God move through people decades later.
That's crazy.
So you start to connect with these other guys, and it sort of broadens your horizon of what's going on in church world at large, and like kind of where does that start to move you and take you?
Yeah, so there's another podcast that talks about Mars Hill and its story. But about 2 years before the wheels came off the bus, I very much felt released from my ministry and work there. That I had long thought I'd just spend my whole career there. I had no desire or ambition to do something more different. But my wife and I felt, I'd say God has called my wife and I to a couple of specific things throughout life. One of them was to leave Mars Hill and in that same season to move to Chicago. And we ended up moving out to Chicago and doing similar work that I had done with Mars Hill for other churches. And Amplio was sort of born out of that. And Nate and I both ended up here in Chicago together. And God just opened up door after door where we got to kind of come in and use some of the experience we had working at our individual churches to serve other churches. And it was super sweet to be able to serve different tribes and denominations. And, it's to this day, I haven't walked into a church, and it's been so many churches I've walked into. I haven't walked into a church and found people who don't care and who don't want to do the best with what God's given them. You just haven't. Different people have been entrusted with more or less, but like no matter what someone is given, like every time I show up, like they're trying to do the very best with what they have, and to be able to use experience and just lean into my own relationship with Christ to try and have like discernment on like, hey, what do I think is the right thing, right? Not one size fits all approach, but like what's it look like to help this person? And here we are 12 years later, and I mean, you guys are leading, and we have an incredible team of people who I think really carry that same heart to show up and help churches make the most of things. But I would say just continuing to progress in my story, because I don't want to talk about Amplio too much here. During COVID, my wife and I had another one of those moments where God clearly was calling. So like, I think God's got calls on people's lives and stuff, but something I've specifically noticed is like, when there's a call that my wife and I are like, we're both on the same page about, there's something special about that call. And so moving to Chicago was one of those. Adopting our youngest son was one of those calls. And those are some of the sweetest things that bring us together as a family and close to relying on Christ through those seasons. But during COVID, there was another one, and it was a specific drive where my wife and I we just totally broke down and in tears. It had been on the heels of taking a little bit of space as a family, and coming out of COVID was brutal for everybody. But coming out of it, we'd gotten away and just had some space up in the mountains, and the benefit of that space and what it had provided for our family was such a blessing. And God met us in that and just laid it so on our hearts that to serve leaders in that way. And I think there's an aspect of me that had grown weary in helping churches with projects, giving tools, and then just seeing leaders totally burn out and completely lose perspective and honestly hold their project as something bigger than they should. And, when we find our identity in the wrong things, at some point, by God's grace, He reveals that to us, and that's rough. I think it leaves us in a pretty low place at times and disappointed, and it leaves us recognizing we've been burned out and we've been working hard for maybe not the right reasons. And I remember working at Mars Hill, and I hit the wall so many times. But there was one specific time where I literally was demoing this old house, the second house we had. And we had, we're knocking all the walls out because it's on the main floor, because that's the thing to do, right? Get rid of all the little rooms, have one big open room, open floor plan. And this is lath and plaster. It's miserable. Okay. And so I'm literally sitting in a pile of rubble because I just carrying all this plaster down. So I'm sitting in this pile of plaster, and I'm totally burned out. I'm just doing too much, and I'm not going at any sort of a helpful pace. And God absolutely showed it to me, and I'm literally just sobbing in this pile of rubble. And but I'm not the only person who works this way. And I know in ministry specifically, there's so many people I've seen, and I think one of the blessings of working with so many churches over so many years is we'll end up in restaurants, different places where, I end up being somebody that other people in ministry recognize they don't owe anything to. I'm this safe person who's not going to get them in trouble, or
you're going to get on a plane and fly somewhere city tomorrow. So it's
they owe me nothing.
Unload.
Safe. And I've been in ministry, so I get it. I can relate to what they're saying. And a lot of their friends and community have no idea what they're carrying. And so a lot of these guys have just fallen apart and, kind of been honest about, the mess that they find themselves in. So it's super cool to do a project. Love doing projects. Got to do it. Help move the mission forward. We want to create more space and seats and experiences for people to hear the gospel. All 100% for that. But I so desperately want to see the people who are leading in that do it for the rest of their lives. And if we do it on our backs in a way that we're the hero, God doesn't get the glory. And honestly, I don't know. I look at Moses, he worked real hard, and then he made some mistakes, and he didn't get to go into the promised land. And I think at a very big level, you've seen a lot of senior pastor failures over the last 10 years. Some pretty painful things for us as people in ministry to look at, and it's easy to point and be what'd they do? Yeah. But I think we need to have humility to recognize those are just because they're big and well known. But there's a ton of people in the trenches. That's the same thing. Their lives are being laid up in a way that is unnecessary and not what God would have for us. And so, driving back from that place with my family, my wife and I were just in tears, and God very clearly had a call for us to start a place where we would serve leaders, and that, it would be separate from Amplio, but that a lot of it would dovetail in terms of just I don't want to just serve pastors in this professional way. I want to serve them in this pastoral way, and we want to see people have it. I think the same season, we're going through COVID and we're not allowed to hang out, to stay at home, or not go to restaurants without getting your Vax card checked, or
those were the days.
Oh yeah. But I, in that season, we actually moved our Amplio offices, and we were able to keep the old building. We rent part of it out, but we actually were able to keep a lounge. We'll call it a lounge.
It's a great lounge.
It's a great lounge. It's the permanent Amplio lounge. It's pretty great. Yeah. But in that season, you go in, you you go through a bookcase and you go upstairs to the lounge. It's like that. The upper room at the King's Head, we call it. And but during COVID, it was a space where a lot of pastors and ministry leaders would gather together and spend hours just encouraging one another and being encouraged by one another. And I think part of that was also the same season and timing. I've seen that, like, man, like when you're in ministry, just all of life, we need our tribe, we need our people, we need our group. And we were just talking before this, like, you know, if that's not always the people you work with, I think it's great to enjoy the people you work with. But it's that's not always your most trusted circle. That's not always like the people you take everything to. And but I think people in ministry, like, often don't have that. And that doesn't contribute to it. So to create a space where we could pull groups of people together, where we could love on them, where we could have good food, we could have fun, we could just disconnect for a few days. You know, I had experienced a couple things similar to that, to kind of, we've modeled that off of. But I mean, it wasn't a year after God kind of gave us that call, that opportunity came up for a piece of property that was well developed. Up in Grand Rapids, and about 600, a little over 600 acres, and we have a beautiful piece of property up there now. So 2 years ago, we jumped in. We launched what we call Stillwater Reserve, and we have been really throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall. If I'm honest, I think we've had guiding principles if we want to serve people in ministry, and we are. Have been really creative in the different ways that we do that. And so we've got some groups that we get to host that are, you know, programmed. And, you know, there's a lot of guided conversation where we walk through real things that they're carrying. I mean, that first roundtable in August of 2008 with the other tech directors, it was guided. There was conversations and big sticky notes on the walls, and what are you dealing with, and what are you dealing with, and circle which ones you want to talk about. And so we do some of that. I think it's super helpful. And you know, there's a lot of people who don't get that aren't plugged into that type of thing to solve their problems. So it's a blessing to be able to do that for leaders of the church. We got groups that are where we don't do anything we don't want to do. So we just have fun.
Me too.
We got ATVs. We got a 150-acre high-fence deer ranch. We've got a gun range. We'll shoot some clay. We got fishing. We got some boats. We're on 1.5 miles of a lake. We've got, I don't know, lots of hiking, and I don't know what else we do. We do lots of fun stuff up there. We got a big old Traeger, so we smoke. We're always smoking meat.
It's amazing.
Yeah, tons of solo stoves, and we just enjoy sitting around and having fun and digging into real conversations. So we've got a big table, fits like 18 people around it, and so, you know, we'll ask, you know, while there's no agenda, we're going to sit around the dinner table and get honest with each other about how we're really doing. And you know, sometimes those conversations don't go anywhere, and sometimes you see God work in really, really cool ways. Yeah. So some of my favorite groups have been the singer-songwriter groups that come up. There's been a couple of those. I think Justin was on here recently.
He did. Monday.
This episode dropped yesterday.
Shout out to Justin.
So a lot of their stuff that they're releasing, like they come out every summer, and they'll write 19, 20 songs in 2.5, 3 days.
It's crazy to me.
Crazy. I love it. It's fun to have them out there. And there's a couple other groups that come out too, but it's been a blast to kind of see some of the songwriting pieces and the creative pieces that we get to support and see some of the new songs of the church being written. Be able to see that. That's a blast. There's churches that rent it just for elder retreats or church leader. We love it. Again, for me, like, it's spaghetti at the wall. I want to serve leaders and give them space. So if they're coming out and they're going to talk about the next upcoming ministry cycle, that's awesome. We're also going to go have fun. And we're going to go rip on some ATVs in the woods and not flip them.
I'll say wear some helmets.
Was that Justin's? Was that their group?
Yeah.
I think.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
It's great.
No worries. So you talk to a lot of pastors through this, right?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people coming from different backgrounds, different contexts, different ages and experiences and whatnot. But like, what are the trends that you see? Like the people that come that are looking to step out of their day-to-day, like where are they at? What are they looking for? What are they struggling with? And, I think, the people listening might relate to some of those things.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is most people go into it not realizing how much they need it. I think our culture, I could go down a rabbit trail of like, for America to be the superpower that it is, we have to drive a certain amount of continued economic growth. So culturally, we are always driving harder to get bigger numbers and to have each household make more money. And like for us to maintain ourselves as a superpower, like culturally, we have to keep this underlying that there's never enough and that we have to always be doing more. And I think you layer social media on top of that. And I mean, inside and outside the church, just culturally, we are chewing ourselves up as individuals. Culturally, it's not good. It's just not good. The pace and the speed and everything in which we go, we are just blinded to how unhealthy we actually are. And I think, this was literally at church a few weeks ago. A pastor had a squirt bottle. And he was like, "This is how long a mist is," and it goes away real fast. And the Bible talks about where life is nothing more than mist. And I think I'm not that old yet, but I'm old enough to know that a mist is not very long. And I feel the mist already dissipating of just my own life. And so I think people go into those retreats not realizing how bad they need it because we've normalized something that's entirely insane and crazy in terms of the pace that we live. And we are just never content with it. So I think, so when you actually stop for a few days, it just opens your eyes a little bit and you get perspective. And I think, honestly, that God actually can speak and meet you in that. I think we quench the spirit as a Christian culture by the amount of time we spend in front of screens, entertainment, even just doing things. Yeah. I think we need to figure out how to slow down. I need to do less. Which is
to bring it back full circle to what you started with in this conversation.
Chief sinner of doing too much, but the understanding of how important that is to be working towards that. So
and I think it takes time when you are breaking. When you go on those retreats, and I went on one a couple years ago, and I felt like it took 2.5 days for me to be I slept in the third day, and I was like, oh, that was nice. That feels really good. But it's this inherent I think I had my phone in my pocket, even on airplane mode, for the first 2 days. Because it was just like this, I want to have this in my pocket because it feels safe to me, even though nobody could actually reach me, even if they tried. And you don't really realize that until you're...
I've intentionally started leaving my phone places not even on accident. I just leave it.
That's great.
Because if I leave my phone at home and I go somewhere for a few hours, I probably spend the first half of that time what have I done?
Yes. Right.
But then the second half of that space, I'm just finding the joy in being disconnected, and the amount of stress of just letting go of that is, it's good. It's real good.
Yeah.
Again, not only I think is it good for people, but spiritually, I think we quench the spirit when we are always connected, always on, and don't give any space. So learning to do that is so important. I think, so that's one thing, just the space.
Yeah.
I think the connection to other people. So the reason we started this instead of a conference was my favorite ones, even where we do content, it's not about us presenting information, it's about it's all about connecting to everybody else who's there. So some of my favorite, I look over what's been the most impactful and favorite moments in my career, ministry, life, and it's when I get connected with people who are like me. So whether that's ministry leaders or other business owners or dads with kids, the same. I have 5 kids, so you get other dads with lots of kids. There's just I like to hunt. So when I get together with other hunters, I really enjoy like, oh, you've been there, this experience. We connect in this certain way. And when you can pull pastors together that are weary, or ministry leaders at whatever level in the organization that is, but as much as possible in the same, they carry the same weight, because the senior pastor carries a different thing than the worship pastor or the children's pastor. They all carry stress, but it's not the same. So for them to even relate to each other, they can't always relate to each other. But when you can get all of the same type of people and ministry leaders together, all of a sudden, like it unlocks something of I see you, and the ability to care for someone else and the ability to be cared by somebody else has a profound encouragement on people that I think, again, don't realize that they need it. We're so strung that we don't see that we need space. We don't see that we need encouragement. And I think once you start seeing some of those things and you see the benefit of it, you're willing to prioritize it in a different way. So getting people to show up, that's actually really difficult. It's like, I want to say it's like 6%. We have to invite 100 people to get 6 to show up. Like it's just
that's crazy.
It's insane. We can't and that's not just us. That's like, I made lots of other friends who do similar ministry around the country. Like we don't have a perceived need to rest.
Yeah. Or it's almost like can be even worse than that, where it's not even like a perceived need. It's almost viewed as like a negative. Like rest is bad, taking time away from these things that I'm doing, they're so important. I couldn't possibly neglect them by going to do this thing. And so
even my family, I can't leave my family to go. When you're on a plane, they say if the oxygen masks fall, to put your own one on first. And this is this has been my thing. It's like, if we're not taking care of ourselves, then you're not going to be a good husband or father. So if you're working so much that you're not putting any time into that, well, that's a problem. Let's talk about that. But if you're actually spending the time at home and you don't feel like you can go and take care of yourself, I mean, we need to have a real conversation about like, you're not going to finish well. If you do a survey, I want to actually do the full survey. So I've done research on this, but I've not done the full survey, but I want to do it. You survey all of the leaders throughout the Bible who you can see kind of how they led, and you can see but you can specifically see how did they finish? Like the percentage of leaders who finish well in the Bible overlaid with like what percentage of people finish well in ministry today. Well, in the Bible, I believe the number is about 30% finish well. I think there's only about 100 that you can see how they actually finish. And like most of them fail spectacularly. Some of them fail spectacularly. Today in ministry, it's about 10%. It's like real bad. 1 out of 10 will actually finish their career in ministry, even though I think, again, I don't know the stats, but I would assume most people are sincere and like they would love their entire career to be in ministry, and they have no desire. Like that was me. I never envisioned leaving Mars Hill. Like I would, if it was what it was, even with its messiness, I would have stayed there for my entire career. I absolutely loved, because I got a front row seat at seeing God work, and I loved seeing God work. And learned there. I spent my 20s there, right? So I learned in my 20s that the thing that brought me the greatest joy was not making money. It was seeing God at work in people's lives. And so everything I've tried to do with my life since then has been orienting selfishly in some capacity, like seeing God at work. Right? That's a beautiful thing about Amplio. We get to show up when churches typically are doing projects. There's a small part that gets to show up when churches are not doing that, but most of the company gets to show up when things are fun, and we get to see God work, and it's a great joy for the people on our team. And I think but a lot of what Stillwater has been for me is being able to like see God work, but it's not always at the high points. It's sometimes it's at the low points, and those relationships that get forged around fire. with guys, gals that you don't owe anything to.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, like the ability to have compassion and just be in it together. We need a tribe. You need rhythms of rest. You need that. And I think people hear it all the time, but I still think we are not doing a good job of it. So when I look at like, what types of rhythms of rest, what does that look like, right? Like what's the frequency? I think, I think there's a couple different matrix pieces to it. I think you need to have something, you need some frequency and rhythm that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. And I think you need that for you professionally, family, marriage, and yourself. So like you layer 4 things across those increments, and that's a lot of time trying to make sure, like you gotta get away with your wife. If you're married, you gotta get away with your wife. I mean, she's the one person who's gonna be, or your spouse. I'm looking at 2 guys. Get away with your spouse. That's the one person who you're gonna spend all of your life with, everything. And if you're not building into that relationship, you're gonna be disappointed at some point when it falls apart. Your kids, like there's nothing more important than your kids. And your relationship with Christ, I think that's you getting alone on your own. And that could be fun with other guys, but like there needs to be some intentional like withdrawing and in space. So you could do a trip quarterly. That would be something like what we're talking about at Stillwater. But you also should go away by yourself for a day every once in a while and just be silent. And I think finding the right rhythm and actually like mapping out, hey, what are the things that, and trying new things? Like what have I found that God's really worked in me and what do I do that? Like I go on vacation with my family. I love it. Yeah. It's not restful.
No, not when children are there.
No,
never.
But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
But that's not like, I can't, that doesn't check the box of me getting space or me being encouraged even. Like it's me serving and leading my family and creating memories. And there's joy in that for me, but there's not necessarily rest in that for me.
Yeah. It's interesting too, like, you're saying, well, even out of those 4 buckets that you're saying, like it's caring for yourself is more than not the hardest because it's the thing, like as a dad, like when I went on that trip for myself and it was 5 days and I go, the week before I wanted to cancel because I felt so like I was doing that selfishly for myself and that my family, my wife, my 3 children would be sacrificing for dad to be away on a fun fishing, hunting, alone, cigars, whiskey, all of the thing around a fire with a bunch of guys. And it felt very selfish for me to do that. And I wanted to leave. And I remember one of the leaders there saying, I can't remember the percentage, but it was a very high percentage of people who are scheduled to come don't show up the last minute because they feel like I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't let my ministry down. I shouldn't let my family, my wife, my kids, whatever this down. And the reality is when they do that, those are the people that fall the fastest out of that. And, I remember one of the leaders, he's like, that little cabin over there is for the senior pastors and the executive leaders who have moral failures, who cheat on their wife, who make mistakes in their congregation, do all this stuff, and they stay there for weeks sometime by themselves. And they sit in that cabin, and they figure it out, with God. And it's hard, man. It's very, very hard to selfishly feel like this is something I'm doing for myself, and it's going to actually make me a better dad, a better husband, a better leader in my church, a better pastor by actually like stepping away. And
so when you go on those trips, you should feel the weight that you do need to make the most of it.
Yeah.
Making the most of it probably starts with just putting your phone away.
Yeah.
But like, you have to be smart about what do I need to get out of this time away? What is it that God would have me get out of this? What is it that I know I need right now? Sometimes, go have fun. Sometimes it's like I need to go sit in the woods and read a book of the Bible and just let God work on me. But I'll tell you, without fail, every time I've come back, my wife's like,
you should have done this earlier.
Should have done this, yeah. Go ahead and book that again for next year. Not only that, at work, the number of times over the years that like I've gone out and come back, and Nate Krause, who I started this company with, looked at me and said, you need to get out more often. Because like this idea that quantity is, we should value that more than quality is just garbage. Like we should do less, and we should do it well.
Yeah. And I don't want to keep talking about my experience, but when I went on that trip, it was 2 weeks after I left ministry. And my last night there, on the fourth night, I'm sitting at a table with 25 guys that are way better leaders and are still in ministry. And I felt I felt like I was the oddball out because I had just quit. And all these guys were in the trenches of it still. And I walked away early on in my career, if I'm looking at age, right, and compared to these executive pastors and senior pastors who were there. And I remember saying at the table, because they, go around and go, hey, everybody's got to say something, And I remember saying, if I would have done this 6 months before, I never told you this too. If I would have done this 6 months earlier, I'd still be in ministry. No question.
Yeah.
Like me not doing that hurt me in different ways. And it's still where God was leading me in that season. I'm still very happy that, I did that. But it was a very eye-opening thing for me that I think in that moment, and we've talked about this on other episodes, like I think sometimes we think that the only people who deserve that in ministry are the senior pastors who get their sabbatical every 7 years.
Right.
And they get to go off for 2 months or 3 months or whatever that is. And the reality is, regardless of where you're at in ministry, it's like if you don't have that, like there's no way you could ever sustain that for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I think about that often. And I look back at my journal every once in a while and I read the entries that I wrote during that week. And I'm like, gosh, like I was doing some stuff through me that I forget about. And I'm happy that I even wrote them down so I could go back a couple years later and go, oh shoot, I need to think about that again. Because you forget how quickly you will forget.
Going back and reading old.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at writing things down. I've never journaled well, but like on some of those trips, like that is where I have journaled. So I don't have very many, just a couple.
Yep.
But like, it's incredibly powerful to look back and read some of those things and just see where where he's brought me from. And it's just always incredible to go back and remember what seemed so big to me at one point.
Yes. Yes.
And it's just not. Which helps me now when I'm totally overwhelmed by something to like know that, in 5 years when I look back on this, perspective is really important to maintain. And you can't do that with the normal pace of everything.
And it just doesn't feel like that in the moment. Yeah. The things that are happening in your world right now are the biggest things that are happening in all of our lives, whether it's family or career or life or whatever. Yeah. And we don't know the outcome of what that will be. God knows. And he's like, don't worry, but we have no idea. Yeah. And the writing down, I'm terrible at that too. But the times that I have, I go, why don't I do this more?
Yep.
We used to do a time capsule at the campus that I was at the chapel. And every year we'd dig it up. And I remember like looking at these notes with our, we'd bring out all of our families or whatever and have a barbecue or whatever. And I remember like I have all the letters written in my nightstand. Every once in a while I pull them out. And I was like, maybe a year ago I read them. I'm like laying in bed crying. I'm like, reading to my wife. And I'm like, in the moment, like I remember you think back instantly to where you were in that moment thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to afford having the second kid that's on the way? How are we going to do, whatever this is? And I just go, man, like God had us through all of that, but So journal, everybody, because it's really, really good.
Yeah. And there's lots of different things. So like for me, I actually have been really terrible the last couple of years, but I really enjoyed bow hunting. I've really enjoyed it. And I think it's less about the actual like thrill of the hunt, although that's a lot of fun. Because I could just sit in a tree stand by myself when it's literally 32 degrees outside, pitch black, 5 a.m, and I'm happier than happy. But it's the space. And so like there's different things like, I think going on a trip, finding your tribe of people that are outside of, you don't owe them anything. Yeah. We all need that.
Yes.
I think I've been blessed with a couple of those tribes, and I love it. I mean, it's those are just really encouraging places to be. But I think it's one of those more regular places you can invest into is like what's something for you. So for me, honestly, for a long time, like distance running. I got into some distance running things back in the day.
You did a lot of that.
I did a lot of that. But some of the greatest like benefit of it was the space it would create. You're going to go out and run for 20 miles. you're gonna be out there for a few hours. And honestly, you'll find the end of any desire to listen to a book or any music. And so at some point, usually within 2 hours, you're just tired of it all. And so you're just out there running, and it's painful, and you kind of come to the end of yourself. And like, there's something about God meeting you in your weakness in that, as silly as it is. But like, again, it's just a simple way to be able to like have some different things I'm committed to, or spaces and ways in which I can be healthy, not just physically, but truly mentally and spiritually. So that got me, like, running got me through COVID. COVID was brutal. Because,
Yeah. It's also interesting, the timing of like how you and Cassie felt this call on your heart to do camp in Stillwater, was in the middle of the biggest mass exodus of people leaving ministry in all areas of
I think anyone who
leadership to down.
Anyone in ministry has heard all these horrible numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
They're astounding.
Yeah.
And they haven't gotten any better. They keep coming out with new numbers, and they're just like, hey, it's more bad numbers. It's great. We've had a lot of guys come up that are like senior pastors, like, I'm looking for a new job, and looking to get out. Yeah. And I've actually been really encouraged to see some of them leave their time just after a couple of days of like, you just haven't created any space for yourself. Yes. After a few days, they're like, you know what, I'm actually going to dig back in. I'm pulling my resume off Monster, and the God hasn't released me. Yeah. Like, I feel really clear God hasn't released me, and I need to figure out a better way to go about the stress. And we've had some guys that burned out, and they show up a week or two late. But again, it's just a special place where God can meet someone, and regardless of where you're at, it's cool to have places where you can go meet God. I think finding places where you can go meet God is worth having. So.
But clearly, it's not going to happen like accidentally.
Nope.
Right? So, if you're thinking about someone who is hearing this discussion and thinking like, that's me, I'm on that track, or I'm feeling some of those things, and I need to start changing some trajectory and changing some rhythms. Yeah. Like, what are some things that you've seen even in your own life that could be first steps, or that you hear from the pastors you talk to, that could be first steps into helping them move in this better direction? Yeah.
So I think I would plan to get away, create space. So like, just create space. And that's step one. You're not going to do anything in the noise of day-to-day life. So whether it's just whatever you can get. So you got different dynamics in everyone's lives, and I get that. But like, take a day, take a Saturday, and or if you take a day during the week. But I mean, it could be as simple as just go on a hike, just get outside and just create some space. And I think ask God to show you these things. I think you need a tribe of people that you owe nothing to. So where are you going to find that? I think we create some of those through some of the groups that we do. So like, my favorite groups are when like maybe one or two people because you brought your just in case I know somebody with you, your buddy from the other church, totally, or you the guy you just hired. Maybe you want to hang out with him, maybe you don't, but it's better than a bunch of weirdos. Yep. But like I think coming, my favorite groups are the ones where one or two people, but you don't know everybody. You got these, coming in from 12 different states, you fly into Grand Rapids and we pick you up and we'll drive you up, and, dinner night one is usually smash burgers right now. And, and it's, you got that first day where you're meeting people and it's a little awkward, but by the end of the second night, you've made some friends. And, I think that a lot of people take those relationships home, and they'll be able. Now I've got someone on my phone I can reach out to who I don't owe anything to, but cares about me. And I think you got to find people who you owe nothing to, but they care about you. And if you can find a group of them, that's super cool. And if it's in your town, you can find a group like that. In churches we call these like small groups. But often when we work in churches, we don't find that through that official program. Yeah. So I think there's still benefit. You still need that. There's a value in that. So find people you don't owe anything to who care about you, and figure out how to get time with them. Figure out how to create some space and just be you and the Spirit out in the woods. Like, go for a walk with Jesus. Legit. Like, just get out. And then I think finding a trip. So where a lot of us are in networks where we have opportunities and we just need to say yes to them.
Yeah.
We don't. Yeah. Say yes to the things that you're being invited to. If you've got nothing, or even if you do and you want to like come do our thing, I'd love to have people out. So we do trips year round, and whether it's, hey, I have this community and I'd love to bring them out. Like, they can connect with me and I'd love to put something on the books and serve them. If it's just an individual who's like hearing this and saying, hey, I need to do something. You're not wrong. I need to go do something, and I have no idea where to start. Just like hit me up and we'll get you on a trip and we'll go from there. But I think, gotta create space. You gotta take a couple hours by yourself outside once a month. You have to do that. Until you get in a rhythm of doing that, you don't see the benefit of it. But that everybody can do that. Yeah. And I think finding people you don't owe anything to is a big deal.
I don't remember if it's in the episode that comes out with Mike next week, but in one of the conversations we had with him, it was even as simple as going on a walk without, like, leave your AirPods.
Right.
Don't listen to your book. Don't listen to your music. Don't listen to your worship music that you're, want to have space with the Lord. It's like that silence is a very, it's a very, very powerful thing that can feel really, really awkward for the first little bit by yourself.
Yep.
And it's weird to think about that. But when you think about, like, this is weird to be like not listening to
because
something.
You could be doing something.
Of course.
And you're choosing to not.
Yes.
You could be playing a video game on your phone and you're not. And like even that, like somehow we feel weird about. Like we have to fill every minute with being productive in things that don't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. So
my drive, my commute for I live Chicago, the camp's a half hour north of Grand Rapids. So that's a 3.5, 4 hour drive. I do it a lot. And usually when I'm driving back, I'm on phone calls the whole time, but on the way up, it's often like 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'll do that. Just silence for hours. And it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny.
Have you ever heard of these like silence retreats where like, people will go out for 24, 48, 72 hours and it's just, you don't talk.
Silence.
Yeah. You can even go with other people, but you're just come together for meals, but you're out.
Yeah.
Hanging out with the monks, doing nothing by yourself, monasteries, stays. Like it's, I've not done one.
There's
I
one,
think I would
there's
really
one nearby
enjoy
here.
it.
I've done it.
I went to that one.
You've done it?
Yeah.
What was your experience?
Yeah. I mean, it was only like a day. It wasn't like more than that, or even 24 hours. It was like 9 to 5 or whatever. I can't remember. But
did it leave you wanting more? Or was it weird?
It's not weird. No, I would say it sounds weird when you talk about it.
Yeah.
But it actually, in practice, it's not as weird as you think it would be.
Yeah.
If you just kind of like go into it and like you were saying earlier about like the process of having to kind of have a little bit of time where you're thinking about all the things you could be doing in your phone and whatever. But I think you can almost even pre-wire that out of your brain if you're anticipating it, right? So like even start before you get there, sort of like processing through those things and releasing them and whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it was many years ago, but I think I would say the feeling I had leaving it was just like light, like just refreshed.
Yeah.
I couldn't even tell you like any big takeaways of like this aha moment or anything like that, but it was just refreshing.
Yeah.
And it didn't hurt that the weather was beautiful and the campus was amazing. And, but again, it's like there's other people around. You can do whatever you want, go wherever you want, but it's really just you and silent. And I think, so as I'm even talking about this, a lot of the things that we've mentioned so far in the conversation have been sort of this idea of, hey, you're at a breaking point, you're in a crisis or something, and you need to do these things to like combat the crisis. And I think there's also like the other side of it of it's a maintenance thing of just
100%.
it's like things could be going fantastic and you're feeling great, and it's like this is just exactly like this is just sort of reinforcing and reinvigorating and like maintaining that in a positive way.
Yeah.
So I think if someone's listening to this and thinking, well, I don't feel like I'm burning out tomorrow, this is for people that are like about to go off the deep end. It's like, No.
Everybody.
Yeah, right.
Inescapable.
And it might look different for you if you're not in that place, but the idea of, getting alone, changing your environment, getting into new spaces that are different than your day to day, that kind of disconnect you from the things that you do day in and day out. Like that's really valuable no matter where you're at.
Yep.
Yeah. That place is in Mundelein, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Same areas.
That was I remember when I was there, I think somebody told us that was built as a replacement or like an emergency spot for the Vatican in World War II if it was destroyed.
No way.
During World War II. Yeah. So
Wow.
they built it in
Mundelein?
That's
I didn't know that.
But
alternate history. What if the Vatican had moved to Mundelein?
Oh my
I
gosh.
think the world would be a little different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an amazing campus. And I think I don't even know if it costs anything, but if it did, it was like pennies. Like it was just a couple bucks to go and they just sit and walk around.
You can stay there. I mean, you can rent a room and sleep there.
Yes.
Like we didn't do that, but you totally can.
Yeah, that's a little more intense maybe. But it is amazing. But I think what you're saying is you don't just it takes a while for somebody to burn into that where you get so off the deep end where you are either completely burnt out of ministry, you go cheat on your wife, you go do that takes time to get there. And in that time to get there, there's many opportunities that I think we've all had in ministry or that people are listening now have in ministry right now to go, hey, like this season, when this episode comes out, it's still going to be pre-Christmas, right? And that craziness that we have all felt leading up into that season, like those are the times, even in the chaos, to break and go, hey, I need a day, I need 4 hours for myself this afternoon before I come home. And I think I've said this on other episodes too. Like I remember my therapist telling me once, like, why are you taking phone calls in the driveway right before you walk into the door and then expect everything to be peachy or for you to be in a good attitude
headspace to actually serve your family. Totally.
Yeah,
you're not going to be.
And they're like, Kaleb, what do you think?
Yeah,
I was like, I don't know.
You're squeezing every second out of every day. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh, it's a 30-minute commute. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I can get a 30-minute call done. That's fantastic. Yeah. And it's the worst thing I could ever do for myself or my family to do that. And so driving in silence on the way home is
I'll do the 30-minute call, but I only have a 12-minute commute. So then I'm in the driveway. Yes. My wife knows I'm in the driveway. So now it's not only am I not going in the right headspace, but I've already disappointed my wife.
I know. My kid's pounding on the window.
There's no coming back.
I know. Yeah. Yikes. Man. It's really good. It makes it makes me think about all the seasons in ministry that I wish I would have done that more and how I feel like I would have led much better than I did. Yeah. And I would do things very differently today.
So my wife and I went to the doctor this morning and we left and I was like, man, he gets up and he goes and does a couple procedures and then he goes and he checks on some patients and then he meets with some prospective patients and then like he's done everything and he goes home. At the end of every day, man, what a nice job. At the end of every day, he's done everything that's on his plate. He's done it all and he goes home. And that isn't nice. My wife looks at me, she's like, you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? That's a very difficult job. I'm like, no, there's no residual stress. He goes home and he's done everything he needs to do. I don't know, maybe he'll get a phone call and he'll have to deal with something that comes up. But like, I think in ministry, or maybe it's just me, there's no chance I'm ever going to get done everything that's on my plate.
Yeah.
There is so much to do that like, and I recognize that that's not for me, it's not a season. It's not going away. Yeah. Like I literally just am always going to have more on my plate than I can get to, or there's more being asked of me.
Yeah.
And like, then I can, so even that, like that, I want to please people. That would be a downside of me. I'm a people pleaser. So like, I want to please people. I want to help. I want to serve. And so there's more of that being asked of me than I can even do. And I think a lot of us in ministry, like that's just something we live with. But there's a real stress on you in that. And so you have to learn how to carry that and like walk away from it and disconnect and then come back to it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you just drowned.
Yeah. I used to joke with my team and be like, I just want to go work at Walmart. I just want to be a greeter at Walmart. I can go home and be happy.
Mine was always, I wanted to like the earth movers, like a bulldozer or something.
Love that job.
Yeah.
It'd be so fun. I literally was telling my dad that the other day.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want to drive construction equipment. That sounds awesome.
Yes. So we don't have a lot of them at camp, but we do have a skid steer, and I can go push dirt. And it's
fun.
Yeah. So last spring, I was making like bike trails and ATV trails with the skid steer out in the woods. And it brought me great joy.
I'm sure it did.
funny.
Unfortunately, I was stressed out by everything else I wasn't doing.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
There are like camps that you can go to, or like for like
yeah.
dudes that you can like rent and like pay money to just like operate a crane. What?
Yeah, Vegas. It's in Vegas.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
Everything's Vegas, man. Shoot a Kaleb gun, drive a race car.
Somebody listening to this is thinking of that like getting away for themselves thing, and they're going to be like that.
That's
I'm
what I
gonna
want to
do
I'm gonna
a
spend
crane operating camp in
$350
Vegas.
and I'm going to work a crane, move some sand in the desert.
Crazy.
Man, that is crazy.
If
Jesus can meet you there.
by chance they want to find out more about Stillwater and what you guys do, and where would they go, how would they hear about that?
Stillwater
Learn more.
Reserve.org. This is our website, so you can you can just reach out to us there. And like I said, if you want to jump on one of the other trips that we're putting together, you can just let us know.
Yeah.
If you're interested in actually like just creating like reserving that space for yourself, we would love to host you and whether it's a singer-songwriter group or you and 5 other churches you're friends with or from your town, fly in, drive up, whatever you want to do. And we love to host the entertainment and smoke a bunch of meat, eat some good food. I think good food, adventure, people you don't owe anything to, and some space create some pretty impactful opportunities.
Awesome. So StillwaterReserve.org.
Yeah.
Very good.
Man, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing with this podcast. I think, it embodies the heart of a lot of what I've tried to do. And so, I guess formally as the guy who helped start this whole thing, it's super cool to see us telling stories of other guys in ministry and the way you guys are doing it. I'm super appreciative of this medium.
Cool. Thank you. We'll see you all next time.